All right, up next, Kamala Harris is actually agreeing with Donald Trump on something. But I kind of think they're both wrong, honestly. Here's Kamala Harris at a recent campaign rally in Las Vegas.
And it is my promise to everyone here, when I am president, we will continue our fight for working families of America. Including to raise the minimum wage and eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
So Kamala is getting roasted for a lack of originality, and rightfully so. Donald Trump, over a month ago, came out with this exact same policy idea. No taxes on tips, although it actually originates decades back with Ron Paul. But anyway, Trump made a big show of announcing this proposal and having it be something he's making central to his campaign, likely in an attempt to appeal to potential voters who work in the hospitality industry and would love to not have to pay any taxes on their tips, to essentially work tax-free or at least exempt from some major taxes. And rather than run against Trump on this, Kamala's simply saying, anything you can do, I can do as well, I guess, and essentially Control-C, Control-Ving his policy plan on this issue and just making it her own. Now, there is some bizarre hypocrisy and incoherence here from Kamala's side that's not necessarily present with Donald Trump, because the Biden-Harris administration specifically increased IRS funding, and the IRS, under its leadership, pushed a new program specifically meant to increase monitoring and compliance with the tax reporting of tips of people in the hospitality industry. So their actual governing record has been to crack down on unreported tips and encourage the IRS to do more to make sure people are paying taxes on tips. But now she's saying she wants to do away with taxes on tips altogether. The math isn't really mathing there, babe. But whether it's Kamala saying it or Trump saying it, I actually think while this idea sounds great at first glance, it doesn't make much sense and it's not actually fair. Trust me, I want working people in this country to pay less in taxes. I really do. And I have sympathy for people who aren't making that much money but still have to give a good chunk of it to Uncle Sam. But despite the way that both Kamala and Trump are framing this policy wouldn't actually help your very low-earning wait staff who maybe work at a Denny's or something, because they already don't really pay federal taxes on net. According to the Tax Policy Center, half of wait staff in the U.S. make $32,000 or less annually. A single worker making $32,000 would owe roughly $1,900 in federal income tax. But that's only if they could not claim any benefits such as the child tax credit or the earned income tax credit. Most parents making $32,000 or less who receive those credits already pay no federal income tax. So the vast majority, although not all, of the waiters and waitresses who are truly low income, who are hoping they would be helped by this, already get whatever income tax they pay back in the form of credits or a refund. On that, they do not pay federal income tax. So how this would actually help them is totally unclear to me. It would definitely help, however, waiters at higher end restaurants who are getting huge tips and earn a pretty good living. Again, according to the Tax Policy Center, the situation for wait staff at high-end restaurants is another story. A 20% tip on a $200 meal is vastly different than one for the $9.95 special at Mom's Diner. Indeed, the Labor Department estimates that the highest earning 10% of waitstaff make $60,000 or more annually. They make far more in tips than in cash wages and could benefit significantly from Trump's plan. Now, even those people are hardly rich, but I don't know that it's necessarily fair to give them a special tax break that nobody else gets. There's a fundamental fairness issue here. Why should one person earning $50,000 a year as a waiter versus another person earning $50,000 a year as a construction worker? Why should the waiter pay no income tax at all, but the construction worker have to fork thousands of dollars over to Uncle Sam? That just seems fundamentally unfair to me. Now, some people insist that, well, tips are actually just gifts, and gifts aren't taxable up to a certain amount. But that's obviously not really true, because gifts already aren't taxable, yet tips are, so clearly the law is currently defining them differently. And I wouldn't really say that a tip is a gift anyway, because you are giving it in exchange for a service, and while it's not mandatory, it is heavily, heavily socially encouraged and expected. I mean, by this logic, if I pay myself a bonus every year through my company, is that a gift? Should that be tax-free? Because I can tell you, it's certainly not right now. So while I definitely want tax cuts for working class people in America in general, I would rather use this kind of money, if we're going to be reducing revenues, to give some sort of flat or across the board reduction to the payroll tax or another tax that hurts working people and eats away at their paychecks for everyone across the board. I don't like the idea of giving one specific type or one group of workers zero taxation and everyone else has to just pay the same full amount. Doing this could also potentially warp economic outcomes in unexpected ways. So one thing that could happen is that people would start tipping less, which would then kind of defeat the entire point. Right. Another thing that could easily happen is that you'd have a real hard time getting anybody to want to work hourly jobs or low salary jobs because everyone would want to work at a tipped job. So all sorts of jobs that are looking for people to work but aren't tipped traditionally would either have trouble finding people or they'd have to switch to a tip model. You constantly hear people complaining these days about how often they're asked to tip. Every screen is tip, 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 even in areas that aren't traditionally, tipped fields. It's not a restaurant. It's not somebody earning $2 an hour and then getting tips. It's a $15 an hour Starbucks worker, but they're flipping over the screen and asking me to tip 20%. Well, I can tell you one thing for certain. If this Kamala Trump policy plan were enacted, you could expect a huge increase in being asked to tip people because everyone would switch to a tip model as much as possible to avoid and reduce taxes. And that would be understandable, but I think it would actually end up frustrating a lot of people. And it puts more of the labor costs onto consumers and less on employers. So people are really annoyed these days about constantly being asked to tip and the excessive amount of tipping culture, but this would almost certainly make that much, much worse. There's also just the raw numbers of it. According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, this would cost anywhere from 150 to 250 billion over 10 years in reduced revenue. That's money that would either have to be directly taxed from other people to make up for it, or it would be added to the national debt, which would then mean more taxes to cover the interest payments and lower economic growth and many other consequences. Or they could print the money to pay for it, in which case we would all get to pay via inflation. There really is no such thing in economics as a free lunch. You can't just give one group a total tax exemption and have no costs or consequences for anyone else. It's not that I'm just spiteful and want struggling waiters and waitresses to have to pay more in taxes, not at all. It's that I don't want to give a special exemption to one group at everyone else's expense, especially when that's being pretty blatantly motivated by an attempt to just bribe people to vote for you. This whole no tax on tips thing might turn out to be good politics for Trump or for Kamala, but it's not actually good policy and isn't a very sound idea on a fundamental level. That's just my take. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you disagree with me. I do want to hear from you.